everyone, and welcome to my part 2 of a Fashionista Queen of Hearts costume. If you haven't seen part 1 for the components and the first part of the assembly, I will have that linked down below for you. And I'm just going to hop right into it, and we will continue working on the sleeves. So from my bodice, I'm going to go to the armholes. So I'm going to start with my sleeve flange, and I'm going to match up my notches with the armhole so I know which side goes to what. And with right sides together, I'm going to first match up that center dot with my shoulder seam. And I will pin that first, and then I will start to gather up that longer edge. Since this is a separate pattern, the dots won't match up correctly, so I just kind of look at it and see where I want it gathered up to. I kind of put most of the gathers in between the dots, and the ends I left more straight. But I will just pin all the edges down around my armhole, and then once I have it how I want, I will move around my gathers so that they are evenly distributed. Do this on both sides, and we'll sew this on at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then turning my bodice inside out, I'm going to take my sleeve right side out. And same thing, you want to match up the notches to the armhole so you know which sleeve goes to which side. And I'm going to first match up my shoulder seam with that center dot. And then the bottom seams I will match together. So they are going to be right sides together as you're doing this. I'm going to start pinning up the bottom straight edges first. And once those are lined up, I will start to gather up my sleeves. And I'm basically going to pull them up until it neatly matches the size of the armhole and lines up. Once I have it how I like it, once again, I will distribute my gathers evenly, and I will pin everything in place. And then I will sew both sleeves on at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So here you can see the flange over my sleeve. Really cool little effect. And then I will take my sleeve head. I will once again match the center dot to the shoulder seam first. And then I will gather up that long curved edge, and I want the end of this to match up with those small dots on the outsides. Once again, you fit all your gathers, pinning it in place, and then you'll go back and distribute them evenly. And the sleeve head is just going to help give you more definition. You're going to sew these both on at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So going to the front edge of my bodice, I'm going to add my zipper. Your zipper is going to start at that small dot. I'm going to lay my zipper right sides together with my teeth lining up at the 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now I didn't have a separating one, this is all I had, and I didn't have a chance to get another one, so this is what I'm using, but it's best to use a separating zipper. We're going to sew this on using your zipper foot along that 5/8 inch seam allowance, getting as close to those teeth as you can. Once you get toward the bottom, just lift your presser foot, move up your zipper head, and then you can continue sewing all the way down to the bottom. So when I turn this right side out, you'll see that it has that nice finished edge. So going to the other side, I'm going to lay my fabric right side up. as best as I can. And then same thing, you're gonna line up the zipper teeth on the 5/8 inch seam allowance with right sides together. Try to get this as even with the other side as possible so it zips up evenly. And once again, I will sew this on as the 5/8 inch seam allowance using my zipper foot on the opposite side. And once again, you can lift your presser foot to move the zipper out of the way so you can continue sewing all the way down to the bottom. And your zipper is now assembled. We're gonna sew our lining pieces together in the same exact way to make another bodice piece. And then with your lining and your bodice, you're going to lay them right sides together, and you're gonna start lining up all your seam allowances with those raw edges around the neckline of your bodice, making sure that your collar is tucked in between. You do not want it tucked out showing. And you just wanna line everything up, pinning it all in place. We're gonna sew this outside neck edge at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure to use a zipper foot where your zipper is at, going right along the teeth once again. Turn your bodice and your lining right sides out, making sure everything's tucked in. And then I'm going to fold out the edges nice and neat and press everything in place. Going to my skirt back piece and my front skirt piece, I'm going to lay them right sides together, and I'm going to pin up the edge, and I'm going to do this to both sides. Sew these sides at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Iron open these seams. Lay your pieces once again right sides together, lining up the center back edge, and pin this together. And same thing, sew it at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then iron open this seam as well. For your lining pieces, you're going to do the same thing, making sure your colors match together. And then take your lining and lay it right sides together with your main fabric skirt. And we're gonna pin up the side, the bottom edge, and the opposite side, making sure to line up all of your seams as you go. Sew these 3 edges at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Clip off the corners so that your corners will look nice and sharp. And then turn your skirt piece right side out. Start folding out your edges and iron them in place. Pin up the top edge, lining everything up. My little sides look funny, but that was because of my mistake I explained in the first video. and then do a base stitch of a 5/8 inch seam allowance across the top. Taking your bodice, line up the center back seam with your skirt and continue pinning and lining up the raw edge. Make sure that your bodice is out of the way. We don't want to sew this in yet. Sew the skirt onto the bodice at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. At the bottom edge of the lining, you're going to fold it up 5/8 inches and iron it down all the way across the bottom of your bodice lining. So that folded edge should line up perfectly with that 5/8 inch seam allowance on the main bodice. And go ahead and pin this all in place. With the sleeves, I'm going to fold up the sleeve edge of my lining 3/8 inches and iron it down all the way around on both sleeves. I'm going to fold my sleeve band in half where we had ironed beforehand, and I will pin this in place all the way around on both sleeves. I will stitch in the ditch where I sewed on the sleeve band originally, essentially just sewing right over that same seam as perfectly as you can get it. And then I will line up the folded edge of my lining with that seam allowance, pinning it in place. We're going to slip stitch the lining to your sleeves as well as the lining to the bodice. Going to my catsuit pieces, I'm going to start with the back pieces, and I'm going to do a gathering base stitch between that top outer edge to the notch. Then I will take my front piece and lay it right sides together onto the back piece, and I want to gather up that ease stitch to match the top armhole edge to the notch on the front piece. So it's just a slight bit of gathering. It's not too much, but you want to have it the same length and then distribute your gather so it's nice and evened out. Then I'm going to clip this in place. You want to use clips because pins can damage your stretchy fabric. I will also match up the shoulders. Line up the rest of that long end all the way down to the bottom, and do this to the other two pieces as well. And I will zigzag stitch this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance as well as the shoulders. So this is what you should have so far, which is basically two side pieces. I'm going to grab my elastic, and I'm going to start at the back neck edge, and I'm going to line the elastic out following the edges to the front edge. I'm going to zigzag stitch these both down. Fold this same edge over, following the edge of the elastic. And then you can do a zigzag stitch, but I ended up using my twin needle to sew this down. This is what we should have. And then do the same exact thing with the elastic on the armholes. Lay one side of your catsuit. You're going to line up the edges of the leg portion, pinning those in place on both pieces. Sew these at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, zigzag stitch, hem up the bottom of your leg, and I'm just folding it up about 3/8 inches. And sew that down the middle. Then take your two pieces and you're going to match up the last raw edges by starting with the crotch seam to line that up. And then going to the center neck edges, lining those up, and then you can pin them evenly down the sides all the way around. It helps if you tuck one leg inside the other to keep all the fabric out of the way. And then sew this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So if you need a little more help, I have a video I will link down below that gives more information, or at least how I learned to work with knits a little bit. So I'll leave that for you to watch if you need more guidance, especially on the double needle that I had used. But overall, the catsuit was wonderful. I am so shocked at how much I really liked it and how it fit. I did shorten it too much, as you can see, but I think it was all right. I think it was okay. It wasn't something I wanted to go back and change. Not that I could, since I was out of fabric anyways, but I'm still really happy how it turned out. Also minus the fact that I wasn't able to mismatch the stripes the way I wanted to as well. And the whole coat actually came out really great as well. It fit great, it felt great, it was a great length, and with my modifications I think I did a great job, minus the top curves tying into the bodice. But I know what I did wrong at this point, and in the future I will keep that in mind when doing similar modifications. But this is done. I'm so happy. I hope you guys like this. Like I said, this definitely dragged out a little bit for me, but overall I could not be happier. Hopefully in the future I can add some props to this to really take this costume to the next level. So hopefully I can do that in the future. But this was my Fashionista Queen of Hearts costume that I had got inspiration from this artwork. I hope you guys really enjoyed that, and if you did, please subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when I have my uploads. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!